Anime Girl Swimsuit Bottom Tutorial. In today's tutorial lesson, we're just going to be looking at the sort of classic anime girl figure that we drew from before, but this time we're going to be seeing what goes on while she's wearing a bathing suit. We'll be looking at both a one-piece and a two-piece bottom, and we'll see kind of how the material warps and works against the glutes. So, we're just going to do two. So, I'm just going to start with a large center line followed by a cross line. This one is going to be looking direct. We're just right behind this first one. So we are just looking straight at it. So I want my hip lines to be relatively even in length here. So I'm going to shrink this one in a little bit. And we're always going to be making little micro adjustments as we go. So it certainly isn't going to be perfect right now, but I'm just trying to get it close. And I'm going to come up like this, or my actual hip bucket. Like so. Kind of shrink this down. Alright. Next, I'm just going to mark out here at the bottom and here at the top, just so we can see what our unmovable section is, where our hips are. That way we'll know that everything has to work around this area. This area here is not going to actually move anywhere. And from there we can kind of better shape out this. There we go. And our center line's a little bit off, so I guess we're just not going to take that center line super seriously. You can always use a ruler, which is probably your best option. So next we'll just drop in our legs, and we're just going to cut them off here at the thigh. This time we have a little bit thicker thighs than what we did last time, but still nothing crazy. We're just wanting to keep that sort of classic anime girl physique here. We're going with a sort of a really delicate, smooth, sort of soft curves here. We don't want anything crazy. And remember, we're keeping the thighs at the widest points near the top. Once we've done that, just quick put in our back. Nothing crazy, we're just popping it in like so. Gonna smooth out my hip line a little bit. I want it to be a little bit softer. Alright. So now we can actually draw the glute section here. So just like before, we're just going to keep our line relatively flat near the top, just over our center line, but then it's really going to curve in here at the bottom. And we want to capture that for this side as well. So then what we want to do is draw in our actual swimsuit. So again, this first one will be the one piece, just like we did before. And what we're going to do is start from, I guess you just pick a part here on the hip. It depends if you want it to be a real shallow one, you could have it right up over the hips like this, so it's really tight in here. If you want it to be a little bit wider, you could do that as well. We'll go for like a good in-between shape, I think. So we'll give it a little mark like this. This time we'll do it without the seam, just so you can see that a lot of the same rules apply. It's just with the seam, just make sure that your seam line is smaller and tighter here on the actual glute, because it's going to be in a very squishy spot. So you're going to have both sides of the seam is kind of getting swallowed by the glute. So you keep it smaller on the squishy parts and wider at the harder hip portion here. So yeah, then I guess that basically is good for this one. Again, you can add your little seam lines if you want. Doesn't really matter. You keep them small on your swimsuits, that way it doesn't really get in the way of the overall picture here. And then we'll just throw in our second one. So our second one we're just going to make here at an angle, just slightly. So what we want to do is draw in our halfway line here, along with our center line. And we want our hip line here facing us to be a little bit more distance in between it and our center line than our line that is here away from us. The reason being is that since she's angled towards us, everything over here is going to appear a little tiny bit larger than here in the back, and that's going to help with our sort of foreshortening, and it'll give it a sense of depth. So next we just want to add in our bottom portion here, and we'll add in the hips, which for her glutes are large enough that we might not really see much of the hip, but we shall see. Just making little tiny adjustments here, trying to keep it relatively correct so I don't have to make too much. I don't want to have to use my imagination too terribly much when I'm actually sketching everything in, so I want this to be in the right positioning here. Again, I'll just mark off the thigh area here. Throw this in. Same with over here. This time there'll still be a thigh gap, but a little bit less of one. So I'm actually going to bring this one in. Like so. Then we want our glute to come out past our center line and then really curve in. So we're still keeping that shape relatively flat at the top before really curling in near the bottom. Then we want a similar shape over here, so this one's kind of not correct. So flat, start the little curl, and really hook in. Well, this glute, because she's got a little bit larger glutes than our last one, I'm just trying to make sure I get this glute here on the right to be the correct size. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to bring this down a little. Like so. Then what we can do is move this thigh back a little bit. This one back to where it was. A little connector here. Like so. Then we can add our back. A little tiny bit of the hip from this other side. There. Now what we want to do is put on our bathing suit. So, just like in the last one, we're going to start basically here on the hips, and then we're going to connect these two a slightly concave line, like so. And we'll leave this one seamless as well. Then here at our halfway point on our hip section, we'll angle this one down a little. I'm going to kind of connect this a little bit more. And then this one is going to actually be angled up slightly. this smaller though. Like this. I'm trying to remember the curvature of the glute. I'm trying to follow that. This one I'm going to tuck in at the bottom a little bit more. Like so. There, now we can actually throw in our hard lines here. And this will be much better for actually seeing what's going on. So what I'm going to do first is draw in these lines here, just so we can establish where they are at. Then we can throw in these lines. And I'll add some seams here, not a lot. Like this. For her, we want the skin here to just barely poke out past where the swimsuit is, since she's got a little bit more meat on her than our previous one, so she's actually gonna have a little bit more squish there, even though it's not a lot since it's over the hip. Then we will drop in our glute shape. And remember, the glute that's in the bathing suit is still gonna pudge into where the bathing suit ends, but the glute outside of it is gonna be spilling over a little bit more. And that's because the glutes here inside are gonna actually be trapped by material that is pretty tight, but really doesn't want to move a whole lot. Then we can add some more little tiny seams, like this. And there we go. So, oh yeah, we gotta probably add the inside thighs here. Mark this off. And this thigh kind of has to get shrunk in here. Just a little bit. Now we can look at this one from the side here. And similar to what I just did, I'm just gonna throw in these lines first. Trying to keep in mind the overall shape of the glute for my seams here. Kind of cut this one off a little bit. Then look over here. And I will attach these. Throw this one on. We're gonna make her belly just barely exposed there on the other side, since she's kind of angled here. Throw in this shape, kind of just blending into our hip area here. So the hip is barely visible, but we can just barely see it here. Then we'll add in a little center line portion there, just to keep it in line with the sort of classic anime tropey bathing suit. Alright, now we can actually get to the glute portion here. So, what we're going to do is give a little tiny bump past the seam that's containing our glute. And we kind of want it to just link with this outside line here. So a little bit different than that. There we go. Then what we want to do is throw in our lower glute. And we are trying to keep the glutes that are covered by our material to be just slightly less perky than the portions that are spilling out of it, because those portions are sort of uninhibited by any material. I'm just trying to keep my shape that I want, as well as getting a correct height here, or length I suppose. Throw this in, like so. Throw that in. And there you go. And again, you can have little seam lines in there. But that concludes our tutorial for the sort of classic anime girl figurine here. It's actually going to shrink this side here. This glue kind of got away from me. We'll be looking at a little bit larger anime girls later, but for this one, I'm still just trying to keep this within reason. Just sort of the classic anime girl figure. So there we go. So now, that concludes it. And just remember that the portion of the glute that is outside of the bathing suit is going to spill out a little bit further than what's inside, since it's got nothing keeping it in place. But that concludes this video, and I will see you in the next one.